Chiefs news, analysis, and opinion every day. Pete over at Arrowhead Pride was nice enough to put together what was, at the time, basically a pre-training camp 53-man projection, and in the nicest way possible, I have some qualms, and I have some qualms on the offensive side of the ball. I did that video a couple days ago, and here on the defensive side, I think I have some bigger differences with how Pete is projecting this roster than on the offensive side of the ball. But we have here, starting with the defensive tackles, projected 4 to make the roster. Chris Jones, Umar Norman-Lott, Mike Pennell. In my opinion, those are the locks. Then he has Jerry Tillery. Now, Pennell is penciled in as the starter right now. I think that training camp is very important for him just to see where his body is. He's a 34-year-old defensive tackle. Came up big in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, but I think that he is best served as a role player at this stage in his career. I don't think you want to be leaning on him for 40 reps per game. And I see no reason to believe at this point that Jerry Tillery makes the roster. The Chiefs have a couple of young and promising defensive tackles in Fabian Levette and Kziah Isard. They are physical anomalies, Kziah Isard especially, but Fabian Levette in his own right are physical anomalies, and I think are special talents, and I think will be especially, I think the Chiefs would be especially prudent to keep them for their special teams. On top of that, the defensive line numbers, if you look at this projection, you have 5 defensive ends and 4 defensive tackles. The Chiefs kept 9 last year, 10 the season before, 10 the season in 2022. Then in 2021, they kept 9. Then they kept 10 in both 2020 and 2019. I think that you're probably wanting to keep more defensive line talent because this was one of the weak spots on the roster last season. We'll get into the defensive ends a little bit in a moment, but there was a lack of talent at both defensive end and defensive tackle last season. It's really sort of a shame, and I'll talk about this probably a couple times in this video, that the Chiefs don't have more young defensive ends. I think that there is a lack of talent at defensive end in the NFL in general. I think it's one of the positions that is sort of really proven to be problematic in today's NFL because of the profligation of the passing game and how this is a passing league at this point. But if we're getting into the specifics of those defensive tackles, this is Fabian Levette. Basically a run-stuffing defensive tackle. I think that he is more in tune with what the Chiefs wanted from previous defensive tackles. They've signed a couple of jumbo-sized defensive tackles in the past. None of them have really worked out. Derek Nottie leaving the Chiefs leaves a bit of a void at the defensive tackle with run-stuffing prowess position. He's a guy who can cause a pile on the line. You see him there listed at 6'3" and 7/10 inches tall, basically 6'4", 316 pounds. Both of those are scoring in the 8s out of 10, so 8.56 out of 10 when you're looking at the weight. 26 reps on the bench press is an acceptable number. It's not a great big strong guy, but he has a lot more play strength than he does bench press strength. Very bad explosive numbers with a 25.5-inch vert and an 8'5" broad jump, but you're not looking at someone who's going to collapse the pocket. You're not, when you're looking at Fabian Levette, you're looking at a defensive tackle who's going to cause a pile, going to stop the run. 5'01", 40-yard dash, very athletic there. But when you're looking at Fabian Levette as a full athlete, you have to look at the hand size, 10 3/8 inch hands, 35.5-inch arms. That is a wild arm length, but that lets him get the offensive linemen off of him. When you look at offensive guards, you look at centers in the NFL, the arm length isn't as big a question with them as it is at offensive tackle. Fabian Levette is one of those guys that can push that issue, causing distance with one of his hands, getting another out to stop a running back. That is what he is really good at. And then Kziah Isard, an absolute physical freak. 9.71 RAS, did everything but the 3-cone drill. So sometimes the RAS score, the total RAS score, is a little bit deceiving because if a guy doesn't do, for example, the vert and the broad jump, the short shuttle, and the 3-cone drill, you're really not looking at the full athletic profile there. But Kziah Isard here did almost everything except for the 3-cone drill and scored well everywhere except for size. 6'2.5". That is a score of 5.43 out of 10. But really, I mean, at defensive tackle, it's a very good size for a defensive tackle. 298 pounds was a little bit light, but we're going to see in a moment how that doesn't really matter. 26 reps on the bench press, whereas you look at the 25, was it 25 reps? I apologize. 25 reps on bench press, 26 reps for Fabian Levette. 25 drops him down basically 0.6 of a point there, but it's just 1 rep on the bench press. And you're looking at a guy who has a 33.5-inch vertical leap, which scores 9.5 out of 10. Very good explosive numbers here. 9'5" broad jump versus the 8'5" of Fabian Levette. This is a monster athlete. A 4.85 40-yard dash weighing 298 pounds is an incredible number. And you're looking at that 10-yard split of 1.56, which scores 9.99. That is an elite 10-yard split, an elite 40-yard dash. I think that he could be on the kickoff coverage. I think he could be on the punt coverage team and just be an absolute monster out there. A 4.52 short shuttle scores 8.46 out of 10. You're also looking at a guy with good size hands, sub 10-inch hands, but 9 6/8 inch hands and an arm length of 34 inches. So another guy that can cause that distance from an offensive tackle. He suffered a little bit from productivity in college. Not the most productive defensive tackle, didn't get the most reps, but as an athlete, what you're looking at when you are an NFL team is, can your coaches take this athlete to the next level? And you have to have faith that a defensive tackle who scores a 9.71 on the RAS is someone that you can mold into a productive player at the NFL level. So if Fabian Levette is who the Kansas City Chiefs wanted when they acquired Derek Nottie, Kziah Isard might be who they wanted when they got Colin Saunders. Now, they didn't have to spend a draft pick on either of these guys. Fabian Levette was a UDFA, was on the practice squad all of last year, and then Kziah Isard was a UDFA this year. I think that he could be a piece for this defense moving forward. At defensive end, Pete has Karlaftis, Omenihu, and Dana leading the charge at defensive end. Ashton Gelati obviously is going to make the team. I think Felix, look, FAU is very fortunate that the Chiefs didn't get a swing at another edge that they liked in the draft. Dana is penciled in as a starter, but I imagine Omenihu eventually gets the nod. Dana and Gelati will be the first guys off the bench. Ashton Gelati proved in college that he has an incredible motor. What he does with that motor at the NFL level is yet to be seen. Felix Anudike-Uzomah was a motor guy in college as well, just hasn't translated to the NFL. It is also a shame that, so the Chiefs, I have highlighted here, 2 defensive tackles that they got as UDFA that are going to, I think, make their mark in the NFL. They don't have any of those guys at edge. Now, the edge position does get drafted, does get overdrafted, and any player that any organization thinks has a shot at being an edge player of significance in the NFL gets drafted, okay? Because there's such a high premium on edge talent. I think that when you're looking at edge, you would take a swing at an athlete that has the abilities to move, but there's so few guys big enough that have the length to make a difference that it's just the Chiefs are in one of these places, one of these difficult positions where they don't have that talent available to them, just like offensive tackle. They've got a lot of guys who are NFL talents, and Felix Anudike-Uzomah is probably an NFL talent. He's not going to make an impact, and they need impact at this point. He was FAU was a former first rounder. Obviously, you want impact out of a former first rounder, but it's just not there. Then you have linebackers. Pete has 6 making the roster. I don't think that is going to happen, but he has here Nick Bolton, Leo Chenal, Drew Tranquill, Jack Cochran, Jeff Bassa, and Brandon George. I think that Bolton, Chenal, Tranquill, and Bassa are the locks. I don't think 6 linebackers make this roster. I just don't see it there because of the numbers crunch that is going to be going on at defensive line and the numbers crunch that's going to be on at defensive back. And when you take a step back and you look at the roster as a whole, last year the Chiefs took so you want to have that split of 25 and 25. 25 offensive players, 25 defensive players. Then you got your 3 specialists, right? Long snapper, kicker, and punter. Last year, they took 26 or 27 offensive players into the season, and that proved fortuitous because that is where a lot of injuries racked up and a lot of underperformance racked up. But the defensive side of the ball, I think this year will get their even split of 25. I just don't think that 6 linebackers make the roster. I think that Cochran and George are battling for that 5th spot. It's possible that both of them perform so well that it leaves the staff with no choice but to keep them both. But with Bassa being the new base set linebacker and a draft choice, I think he has the edge over both Cochran, who has played defensive snaps for the Chiefs, and Brandon George, who is a little bit of an underperformer in college in general. I think that Bassa is going to I think if Bassa is who the staff thinks he is, he will be the first off the bench. Now, in today's NFL, you're playing 2 linebackers a lot of the time because this is a passing league. So that 5th linebacker is basically a special teams ace anyhow. You're looking at basically two base set defensive or 2 base set linebackers, a 3rd guy every once in a while, and Bolton, Chenal, and Tranquill are those 3 guys. So why you would need 3 guys after that, I don't know, unless it is a special athletic specimen, which George really is. But that 5th linebacker is basically a special teams ace, and I think George will pass through waivers, and they would be able to keep him on the practice squad at the cutdown day. So the Chiefs may be incentivized to keep Cochran as that 5th linebacker because I do think someone would sign Cochran if he were cut. I don't think he would make the pass through waivers to end up back on the Kansas City Chiefs. But when we're looking at Brandon George, this is what you're looking at. He is 6'3", which scores a 9.24. He's 246 pounds, which scores an 8.95. He did 28 reps on the bench press, which is a 9.53. If you look at his overall RAS score, it's 9.98. It does not get much better than that. I think Leo Chenal is a 9.99, and he barely plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. So 9.75-inch hands, 33-inch arms. Both of those would be green scores too. I don't know why the RAS does not score hand and arm length because those are things that are looked at by NFL scouts. A 42.5-inch vertical leap scores 10. That's the top, right? 10 out of 10. A 10-foot, 8-inch broad jump, 9.75. His 40-yard dash was 4.65, which is a little bit pedestrian for the rest of his numbers, but it scores a 7.93. A 1.59 10-yard split scores an 8.65. A short shuttle of 4.14 scores 9.49. A 3-cone drill of 6.98 scores 8.72. This is an absolute physical freak that the Chiefs could decide to keep as a special teams ace over Jack Cochran. Jack Cochran has an elite vert. He's got a good 40-yard dash, but he does not have all of these tools. And if you're looking at someone just for a special teams athlete, Brandon George might get that nod over a guy who has the experience like Jack Cochran. At the cornerback position, the Chiefs, Pete says, will keep 6, Trent McDuffie, Christian Fulton, Jalen Watson, Najee Johnson, Noah Williams, and Christian Roland Wallace. There is one notable exception from that list, and it is Joshua Williams. You would hope that you could trade him before cutting him. He's 6'3" with a 4.53 vert is Josh Williams, or 4.53 40-yard dash and a 37-inch vert. He's played 1,169 snaps of defense and 740 snaps of special teams. So he has some trade value. You're not going to get a 3rd-round pick out of Josh Williams, anything like that, but you could trade him for a late-round pick straight up. You could trade him and your 7th for someone else's 7th. You're going to assume you have a better 7th round, or they have a better 7th round pick than you, because the Chiefs are in contention for a Super Bowl. Najee Johnson listed here as the 4th cornerback on this list just by reading through them. He is either the Chiefs' 4th or 5th cornerback. If you want to read the tea leaves and you want to talk about things that are promising for the Kansas City Chiefs, they struggled at that cornerback 2 position. Last year, because of injuries, Najee Johnson was the number 2 cornerback. This year, he is 4th or 5th in that pecking order if Christian Fulton comes back from his injury, which we assume he will, and if Noel Williams performs to the extent that the Chiefs certainly hope that he will, and by the fact that Brett Veach and his scouting department were willing to spend the draft pick on Noel Williams that they did, you have to believe that he will perform. Brett Veach has drafted a couple of stinkers at defensive back, but normally when he's selecting a defensive back that high, he's got a pretty good track record there. So Najee Johnson, last year's number 2 cornerback, might be the number 5 cornerback for the Chiefs this year when fully healthy. So that will do wonders for this defense. That will do wonders for this defensive back group, for the passing game, etc. Safeties. He has 4 making the roster: Brian Cook, Jaden Hicks, Chamari Connor, and Mike Edwards. I've got to be honest with you. I'm not sure Mike Edwards makes this roster. Mike Edwards is going to have to be willing to play special teams to make this roster. I think that Glendon Miller is a guy to keep an eye on. And who is Glendon Miller? Well, 9.26 RAS score, performing all of the tests there. 6'2" and 7/10, basically 6'3", which is a 9.74 out of 10, 207 pounds. Did 15 reps on the bench press, had a very impressive 38-inch vert, a 9-foot 10-inch broad jump, had a 40-yard dash of 4.45 with a 1.56 10-yard split. Those are both very good numbers. A 4.25 short shuttle and a 7.09 three-cone drill. This is an athlete that can be brought in to make a difference on special teams. That is what the name of the game is for that bottom part of the roster. And Glendon Miller, I think, could be a four-phase special teamer because of these physical traits that he has, and he is someone that has the potential to be a real safety in the NFL. He has the potential to play defensive reps. You see, last year, the Chiefs kept Christian Roland Wallace on the roster all year, who was a UDFA. Christian Roland Wallace out of USC made the 53-man roster and played defensive reps. I think that Glendon Miller could be that guy for this season. The main issue that I have with these 25 players that Pete picked, as listed by Pete, is that there is very little space in this defensive group for developmental players. I think that Veach and company love to have developmental players on hand, but I think that the Chiefs are very likely to lean on defensive players for their special teams this year as well. So young, fast, aggressive players are going to be in demand on this side of the ball. And some of those UDFA defensive tackles in particular have that potential. I think that Glendon Miller might be the lone UDFA defensive back that could make this roster. They have several promising defensive backs from the UDFA ranks that could make the roster and make a difference, but I think that Glendon Miller is going to get the nod. Some of those guys will end up on the practice squad. I think that some of them don't pass through waivers. If the Chiefs go with 5 linebackers, they can keep 10 defensive linemen, which means that if they move on from Tillery, both Kziah Isard and Fabian Levette could make the roster. This defensive group, so one of the things that is interesting about the Chiefs is that they've been to 3 consecutive Super Bowls, and they are seemingly getting more talented, they are seemingly getting younger, and they are continuing to be a magnet for talent among the ranks of the UDFA. Part of the reason for that is the fact that UDFA players make this roster every year. UDFA players play base defense and offense for this team every year. This season, I think that they are likely to keep a UDFA wide receiver, whether that is Elijah Badger or Mac Delana, is yet to be seen, but I think one of them makes the roster. Making the roster as a wide receiver, as a UDFA, to play with Patrick Mahomes on a Super Bowl contending team has to be one of the most impressive feats that Brett Veach pulls off. But it's because they are a magnet for talent among the UDFA. This defensive group is basically set at the starter positions. I think that Omar Norman-Lott eventually becomes that second starter at defensive tackle. You have Mike Pennell, who you will throw in, for the run. I think that Kziah Isard could be the rotational defensive tackle for passing situations. I think that Fabian Levette could be the rotational defensive tackle for run situations. You're looking at a jumbo set that could have both Fabian Levette and Mike Pennell on the field at the same time. That becomes a front that is very difficult to run against. And that could be important late in games, especially if the Chiefs are trying to get the ball back, right? So one of the things that has troubled the Chiefs in previous seasons is if they are down, stopping the run, stopping the clock to get the ball back. I think that this defensive group has the talent available to them to stop that problem in its tracks. I don't think that this defensive group is one that is going to be, I think that there is too much depth potential on this defense for them to have the problems that popped up last year, basically anywhere on the field except for defensive tackle. But if you have those developmental guys on the roster, that's a lottery pick, right? Basically, that's a lottery ticket because you're looking at someone who could develop into more. So these are the differences that I have with Pete as far as who will make the roster, the 53 from this group. But we will see how camp turns out. That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about. So consider hitting the subscribe button. Stick around for more Chiefs coverage in the future. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.